Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the September 15th, 2020 GARS workshop. Tonight we've got a really special presentation for everybody. Normally at this point, we would give some instructions about where the exits are at and stuff, but you know, we're not obviously meeting at the EAA hangar, so we're not gonna worry about any of that stuff. Just gonna mention that the workshop tends to be one portion instructional and then one portion hands-on. And whenever people have questions about anything, they're always anything related to ham radio, always welcome to ask about those in the workshop. Let me see. Tonight's talk is going to be by Chuck Adams, talking about various aspects of repeaterbook.com and best practices for programming your radio. Chuck's bio mentions he's had a long and impressive career in the IT and telecommunications industries, and he has distinguished himself as a management consultant, meeting facilitator, and as a college instructor. Currently, as an amateur extra at KB4VT, Chuck serves as the Georgia administrator for repeaterbook.com and as an application specialist for hamapps.com. The workshop this evening will be focused on repeaterbook.com functionality and how it can best be used to support the programming of your radio. And I already have a question or a comment. Yes, we're recording. So, Chuck, I'm going to go ahead and unmute. I'm going to find you on the participant list and get you unmuted here. Okay.
Unmute. There we go.
There you go. I'm going to let you go ahead and take on.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, I'm looking forward to this. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to do a share. You disabled my hosting sharing, so I need to be able to share.
I'm giving that to you right now.
Okay. I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between RepeaterBook and PowerPoint. So hopefully I'll be able to do that with some degree of alacrity. And how does that look?
Looks good.
You see it okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good, very good. How's my audio level? Pretty good?
Excellent.
Excellent, okay, very good. Well, let's just traipse through this material rapidly and hopefully be able to get through this and get to some good questions. And as we go along, I think the general idea was Dave was going to be the guy who would sort of collect comments in chat. So if you'd like to submit questions along the way, just use chat and feel free to do that. Or if you want to chime in, certainly feel free to chime in. Is that how you want to handle it, Dave?
That sounds good to me.
Good, very good. Okay, well, I'll do a quick kickoff, spend about 20 minutes going through some of the basics and then get into some hands-on, and we'll kind of go from there. As far as view is concerned, just as a few setting points, you might want to look at that view in the upper right-hand corner and select full screen and standard for your best viewing, but you pick your own view that works best for you. And be sure you've got your microphone muted. Use the chat for submitting the questions, of course, and Dave will collect them. So Dave, we're ready to go. We're recording, right, Dave?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Okay, off we go. As far as tonight, what I'd like to do is just very briefly speak about RepeaterBook in terms of its background, where it's been, where it's going, some of the worldwide stats relative to RepeaterBook. What are the Georgia stats in RepeaterBook? What are some of the database elements that RepeaterBook stores and maintains? How you go about searching through all that myriad amount of data? How you export all that in terms of lists and search results into a programming tool, and ultimately helping you get to the point where you can program your radio the way you want it done. Primary purpose for this workshop, like I said, is primarily on looking at functionality of RepeaterBook and showing you how to best use it to help you program your radio. Just for the record, I'm a volunteer with Repeater Book. I've been doing this since mid-March of this year. I only administer Georgia repeaters, so I can't speak to any other states, but I can certainly speak about Georgia repeaters. Nevertheless, like I said, I'll be glad to share whatever I've learned thus far. I'll be as candid and disclosed as I can be. And there's certainly been a lot of interesting developments along the way. Not compensated by Repeater Book in any shape or form. I'd have no financial stakes in Repeater Book, and I have no stakes in any other systems or services that may be mentioned in this presentation tonight. So I'm certainly not trying to sell you anything, except perhaps of what I would refer to as the value proposition that the Repeater Book places forward. So, and in all cases, of course, as you should know, Repeater Book services are free. So there's certainly no financial incentive on that side. I'm doing this at the invitation of GARS, and of course this presentation isn't complete without the full video and the written audio part of this presentation. So before we go any further, still okay? Are the screens flipping through okay?
Yes, they are.
No problems? Good, good, okay. Well, if there are no problems or concerns, let's just move forward. Very quickly, I'd like to walk through some of the background, some of the major points, salient points of what's happened in Repeater Book. Basically said, repeaterbook.com is amateur radio's most comprehensive, worldwide, free online repeater directory today. Got its start back in 2006 as NW Ham, and a fellow by the name of Garrett Dow is the president, and has gotten into building this thing. It began as a very regional database, and it was very Pacific Southwest oriented. Started as a guy with two hobbies. He loved to do web design, and he was a ham radio operator. So fortunately, he got into that and started building a database that ultimately moved to out of the Pacific Northwest and further east and into Canada as well. And so as that migration occurred, the service was renamed to Repeater Book. And Garrett was then subsequently contacted by a Canadian, James Ewan, who said, hey, you ought to have Repeater Book administrators. That would give you feet on the ground and give you a lot better information about how to build the database. And the belief was that administrators would have local knowledge, and they would be able to provide a lot of the data that was originally just coming from the different repeater coordinating committees, or councils rather, and the hand clubs too. And that was where Repeater Book got a lot of its initial data, was going to the coordinating councils, going to the ham clubs, going to their websites and finding out, you know, what are your repeaters and what are your repeater lists out there. So the belief was that the local administrators would also add value to the database, and that they would know which repeaters were on the air, which ones were off the air. And as Garrett said in an interview, it turned out his characterization was that it was a fantastic, quote unquote, fantastic idea. And that's really been the model that Repeater Book uses, or has used ever since, is that they have local administrators looking at the whole portfolio of repeaters that are close to them, and then updating and maintaining and curating that information. In 2010, Repeater Book joined a partnership with Chirp. Of course, as you know, a very popular programming platform. Today, you can actually import data directly from Chirp, from Repeater Book in Chirp, and just import it directly. Or you can also use Repeater Book to export data to Chirp as well. So overall, this has been done free of charge and without, because Chirp is free and so is Repeater Book. So this has been a very popular combination that's been out there. In 2014, G4HFQ was initiated a relationship with Repeater Book as well. It's certified for Yaesu programming. And of course, RT Systems, a very popular programming tool, is certified Repeater Book data as well for their platform. A few other platforms that are out there that are miscellaneous off-roaders use it, as well as D-Star Info. So Repeater Book has become a good source of information for a lot of different platforms. As far as other directories out there, I think you have to at least know what the competition is. I certainly, from what I see, RFinder is one of them. I think they're the one that's endorsed by ARRL. That's correct. RF Search and Repeater Map are three alternatives that are out there. But more than that, anything else, what is out there that is probably the biggest competition is all of these ad hoc lists and databases and back of the envelope stuff that people have that it just is always going to be out there. And that's what I first used when I got my radio was, well, what do I program this radio with? So has anybody used any other alternatives other than RFinder, RF Search, or Repeater Map? Anybody else? Any other?
I'm looking to see if anybody adds to the chat.
Okay. Well, I'd just be curious to know about that, because I think that there's certainly, each one of them have their strengths and weaknesses, and I don't certainly besmirch any of the competition. So I would just say that I do believe that the Repeater Book does offer some significant advantages to some
I've
of the
used the ARRL Repeater Book for a long
that's
time.
driven by RFinder. They use that. RFinder also has an interesting, they also have a hardware product. Apparently they have a radio that uses their data to allow you to drive it. So I've not used it or seen it, but it's pretty interesting stuff. Let's look at worldwide Repeater Book, what it looks like. What's the scope of this thing? Worldwide right now, as of 9 August, Repeater Book had 29,740 on-air repeaters. It's quite a few. That's worldwide. Testing is really a rounding error, 163. Off-air repeaters, a little over 1,400. Unknown, a little over 2,200. It's a lot of repeaters. And our Repeater Book does cover all the continents, all the countries in the world now. It didn't used to, but it does now. So what does an annual, what has happened over the past year? Well, it's been an interesting year. There's been a lot added along the way. Repeater Book, with the year ending 09 August, added 941 repeaters. Total update requests that were received, a little over 7,600. Total updates completed, 18,649. Total user reviews, 87. Propagation reports, a little over 1,100. The point I'm making here is the data is not static. It is churning. It is constantly being updated, and it's coming from administrators like me who are out there looking at the portfolio of repeaters and then looking for change, looking for what's been added, what's going online, offline, and that's an important thing. Coming up,
I have one question from the prior slide.
Sure.
The question is, what do the testing repeaters do?
They are basically, the way I understand it is that the repeaters are they're on air, but not yet ready to be used by the general public. They could be on air and off air intermittently, but generally if someone's testing a repeater and doesn't want to quite say it's available yet, that's generally my understanding of what that's all about. But that's like I said, it's a very how do I do this? There we go. Okay. Yeah, and like I said, it's a function of basically some cases. Some people might. There's some repeaters that are seasonal. I know of a couple of trustees who say, look, I go to the Georgia mountains, and when I'm up there, I turn on my 10-meter repeater or my 6-meter repeater. When I'm gone, I turn it off. So I keep them in testing mode because we don't want to be representing them as being a full-time infrastructure. So does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay, all right. Anyway, so here's my favorite slide right here. In terms of repeater requests, update requests that have happened over the past year, ending 09 August, Georgia leads the world. 1,211 updates have been done to the Georgia database. We beat Australia, we beat California, we beat everybody, all the way down to Austria. So very proud of that. and that came through a lot of work, a lot of hours. But we certainly spent a lot of time getting to that point. I'm really glad we've been able to do that. But notice too, we did that in 6 months. Everybody else had a year. So I'm particularly proud of how we've been able to dig in and get the data plowed through and refreshed. And
it certainly puts things in perspective when you have the entire, just one state in the US, Georgia, beats out an entire country of Australia.
Yeah. Of course, Australia's, it's winter down there, so maybe they're all too busy, trying to stay warm or whatever. I don't know, but they're busy and they get a lot done down there, but down under. But yeah, I'm particularly glad to see all of them, frankly, doing well, and we're doing a lot of. Probably, if you look at the data, like I said, it's over 7,600 update requests and over 18,600 updates completed. So like I said, the data is churning, the data is being refreshed, and that should be comforting to people who are out there trying to say, well, where do I go to get good, fresh information? So anyway, on the same thing, as far as 30 days go, the same sort of view. We, on a typical 30 days here ending on 9 August, added 68 repeaters. Update requests, 631. Total updates completed, 2,058. A couple of user reviews and some propagation reports as well. But even in the 30
question that came in from the chat. Do the southeastern states get data from SERA, from SERA?
Yes. And we'll talk about that, but SERA is a huge source of information for us. It's of course, they're the ones that know more than anybody. Of course, they only know about the repeaters that they have verified and coordinated. There are repeaters out there that about 25% of Georgia repeaters are not coordinated through SERA. There's no law that says they have to, but coordination is really dependent upon the goodwill of all repeater owners and trustees to follow the rules of SERA. And from what I can see, SERA is doing a fantastic job of trying to keep all these repeaters from interfering with one another. And it's a fascinating site. I highly commend them to you. If you want to best spend $30 is to go join SERA. You don't have to be a trustee or a repeater owner to join SERA. And you'll learn a lot about repeaters just looking through their database. So that's just, does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay. But even on a 30-day view, we're still top of the heap. Australia got busy, I guess, because it's winter. But in the past 30 days, we added 116. Australia must be doing their updates. But we're still in the top 10, and we're still looking real good as far as repeater book data is concerned and freshness. 7 days, if you look at that, typical week, 10 repeaters added, 126 update requests, 239 update requests completed, no reviews, propagation reports about 19. So even with that, we're still in the top 5. 1 week, that's on an average, but the thing that I want to try to stress here is the data that Georgia is leading the list, it's in the pack, it's the leader of the pack, and that we're able to get confidently the information that's needed to keep information about what's going on in Georgia and what's happening with their repeaters. So here's an interesting statistic too. If you're looking at, well, what are the various leaders and what's happening in terms of ads are concerned, repeater ads, you can sort of see by this one that, our ads, repeater ads, were going between 0 and 250 ads per month on average worldwide. And then all of a sudden, November, December, boom, 2,000 ads for DMR. I'm not sure where that came from. I don't think 2,000 repeaters just magically appeared overnight. I think this must be, certainly the data became available, but this just shows you DMR has taken a big jump in terms of popularity in the repeater world. And that's an update, that's a worldwide statistic right there. We didn't do it here in Georgia. I know that for darn sure. But anybody know why that might have happened? I have no reason to know why that might have been the case. anybody does, put it in chat, because I'd be really curious to know. But from a worldwide perspective, what are the popular different digital modes? Well, D-Star 2306, DMR 3201, YSF repeaters 2374. So that's a pretty pretty interesting breakdown as far as the different types of repeaters are concerned. And I'm gonna real quick here try to see if I can get back to, oops, messed up. There we go. Nope, not gonna do that. All right, so anyway, here's what Georgia looks like. We've seen the world, now let's look at Georgia real quick. Georgia has 402 repeaters on air right now. Probably 2 more have been added here since in the past couple of days since I made this presentation. So 404 for testing. We have 14 right now. Off air 172. But here's the stat I am the most proudest of, relative to all this. When I first started, we had about 150 plus repeaters in what were called unknown status. We didn't know if they were on air. We didn't know if they were off air. We didn't know if they were in testing or what. And so my first job was to go find the oldest listings that I could find and then quickly tackle the unknown list. Say, okay, how do we resolve these? And one by one, going out and doing the research, contacting, reaching out to trustees, reaching out to ham clubs, reaching out to whoever I could get to find out the status. And some of these, it was a lot of work, a lot of just slugging through the data, slugging through the online information, but all of these were helpful. QRZ's helpful, a lot of other sources are helpful as well. So that's been a real interesting challenge, is getting us to this point. But I'm very happy that we've gotten away from having unknowns. Now you'll notice there are a whole heck of a lot of off-air repeaters now, because a lot of the listings we had were repeaters that were listings that were 5, 6 years old, and the repeaters have been gone for years. And that was frustrating when I first started to look. It was a lot of old data. And so I very quickly made it a point to move that data to off-air status. We don't really delete many things, because if a repeater's recently moved off air, that's an important fact you'd want to know. If it's a 5-year-old repeater, though, that doesn't have much value. So what I'll be doing in the near future will be attriting a lot of this off-air data and getting more of the more recent data that has been, or repeaters that have been moved offline, for people who say, well, you know, what happened to this repeater in Dublin? I thought it was still here. Well, no, it went off air 6 months ago. So probably I'd like to see off-air data be limited to 6 months to a year at best, and then I'd like to see it be attrited off into archive, which is what we do. We archive all that data so it's not lost to history. So let's drill down a little bit. We look at the Georgia repeater book data. We have 1 10-meter repeater in Georgia. We have 5 6-meter. We have 187 2-meter repeaters. We've got 25 1 1/4 meter repeaters. We've got 166 70 centimeter, 6 33 centimeter, and 12 23 centimeter. So that gives you a pretty good snapshot, I think, about what we kind of have in the Georgia portfolio here. And you can kind of see what the different status is of the testing and the off-air and everything else. But really the key part is this green part of the screen there in the bottom left-hand corner. If you look at how many repeaters are 2-meter versus 70 centimeter, you've got 353. So that gives you some idea of what sort of radio you're probably going to want to be looking at if you go to buy one. You might want to get a tri-bander, but there are going to be not as many opportunities in the 1 1/4 band as there would be in the 2-meter and 70 centimeter. That's why they make them dual band nowadays. In terms of mode, the FM still leads the pack with about 285. The reason I say approximately on FM is because there are some repeaters out there that, as you know, that can also do multi-mode. They can do FM and then sense the mode that someone's sending to them and then switch to a digital mode. So roughly though, 285 is a pretty good guess, a pretty good bet rather, as far as what's out there on FM. D-Star 55, Yaesu System Fusion 31, DMR 26, APCO P25 4, and GMRS at 1. I thought we'd have more than that in GMRS, but apparently not. So maybe that'll be an influx for later. So, but that's sort of how the Georgia stats look. Any questions on that so far?
There's been a little bit of chatter back and forth in the chat, but nothing as far as a question.
Okay. Okay. Nothing cruel, I hope.
Not yet.
I swear, John's been calling me old, so I don't know. I can't think of anything worse than that. An insult. So anyway, how do you aggregate all that, right? You got 400 plus repeaters that are on air, and I struggled with how do you do it? Well, some counties, some counties have scads of repeaters, and some counties have none. And so as I'm traveling the state, I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I organize this so I don't just have to reach into a huge bucket of 400 repeaters in my memory list and try to grab a repeater. What I finally came to was, well, maybe we should look at what's already there, and that was the Georgia economic regions that have been established. So that became one sort of way I started to sort of slice and dice the data myself from a regional perspective. And this I looked everywhere for this chart. I couldn't find it, so I had to build it myself. But it's a little busy, but I'll zoom in on it here in a second. But the end of the line, the bottom point is that this is a chart that tries to give you some idea of how many counties are in each region. And also, if you look on the far left there, I'm trying to find what in the world is going on here. One slide. Oh, got it. Anyway, the point with this slide is that there are a lot of different counties. We're in Gwinnett, of course. We're in the Atlanta region, 03. And so what I really came to was come up with a short name for each region. I've done that here on this chart, and you can certainly take a look at that and use that. But generally, each region has a minimum of 10, looks like a maximum of 17. And so that's one way. But the good news is with Repeater Book, you'll be able to aggregate any way you want. One of the things you can do in Repeater Book this is really useful is that you can do searches for multiple counties. You can pick any repeater, any county in this chart and say, I want to have Gwinnett and Cobb and Burke and Glassett County. And it'll do that search for you and aggregate that data and allow you to then massage it further as you put that into your radio. Big, powerful point as far as using and aggregating the data that you need to get into your radio. So what gets into Repeater Book and what doesn't? Well, certainly all amateur radio repeaters in the US, it's 10 meters, 6 meters, VHF, UHF, pretty simple. We just recently started doing GMRS repeaters as well, and I believe they're limited to the 70 centimeter.
And speaking of GMRS, Mitch mentioned in the chat that going to the website mygmrs.com indicates there are 10 GMRS repeaters in Georgia. So, or I guess there's been an update, actually 45. That sounds kind of high.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'll be interesting to find out more about that. It's something that's kind of a new development for Repeater Book. So it'll take some time to filter through, but I'm looking forward to embracing that. Like I said, if it's useful, we want to be there for it, and I think that GMRS is certainly an alternative. I didn't realize the fees for those. It's $70 for a license. I looked on Facebook. I mean, on the FCC, it's $70. Well, I don't know.
Well, there's the FCC proposal to introduce a $50 fee for licensing.
Well, anyway, so what in terms of operating modes are concerned, certainly duplex, simplex are also included, FM analog, wide and narrow, D-Star, YSF, DMR, NXDN, Tetra, GMS, GMRS. What's not included in Repeater Book, you ask? Well, certainly federal, state, county, municipal, police, fire, aircraft, commercial, scientific, No satellites on there either. That might have to change now that ISS has a darn good repeater now. But a lot of the other birds that are up there, though, the transponders and the others, aren't in there. APRS digipeaters aren't there, and personal or temporary hotspots aren't listed either. But that's the whole idea, is to really to document infrastructure, the stuff that's out there that's up and operating most of the time, that's reliable and it's going to be there, and that what people want to know about. So what's in the database per se, and for every one of these repeaters that we've talked about, the whole bunch of data that goes into identifying and to describing what that repeater is all about. And of course, there's a whole bunch. There's the downlink frequency, the uplink frequencies, the downlink tones, the uplink tones, even tone locking if need be, not to be confused with tone loc, but used for, in some cases, did I hear a groan? Was that a bad joke? Hiding that data is important for some trustees. I don't know, no one does it in Georgia, but still important for some. Location, landmark, county, state. Coordinates are important because a lot of radios now are having GPS enabled. So knowing what the longitude and latitude of the repeater is important, so that the repeater of the radio can say what repeaters are close to you now, because a lot of radios, like I said, are GPS enabled. The grid square is important. Call sign, of course. Use. Not many private or closed repeaters. I think there are 3 or 4 closed repeaters in Georgia. Operational status, of course, very important, knowing whether they're going to fall into one of 4 categories. None unknown in Georgia. Sponsors are important too, to know who's using the repeater, who sponsors it, who's affiliated or stands behind the repeater is important, whether it's a club or an emergency group or whatever. So that's important too. Of course, the affiliation to ARES, races, Skywarn, CanWarn, those are important too, especially during times of disaster and weather emergencies. Features, of course, emergency power, how these repeaters are linked, whether it's through RF and of course IRLP, different ways of linking through Echolink, and of course there are different modes as far as wires is concerned, D-Star and others. And some of these include All-Star. There's an app code 25, P25, which is a Association of Public Safety Communications Officials Project 25. It was sort of a governmental mode. NXDN, which is an ICOM Kenwood joint venture. DMR, of course, from Motorola, Tetra, and Yaesu System Fusion. So believe it or not, there are even repeaters out there that do amateur television. I've never seen one. I'd love to see how that operates, but end of the day, never knew it. Analog bandwidth, of course, and then 2 important ones. Coverage description. What's the north, south, east, west coverage for this repeater in words? If we don't know the coverage radius, we ought to at least know how far north, how far south, how far east and west this repeater generally covers. So I'm in Lawrenceville and say, yeah, I've got a repeater that takes you all the way to Athens and all the way to Duluth. You have a rough idea of what that is, and that kind of information is useful and helpful for someone who might be using that repeater for the very first time. Coverage radius, though, is something I've really tried to stress in getting updated, but I'm having some trouble with that. I ask trustees all the time, well, what's the coverage radius of your repeater? And I get crickets. Not sure. So part of that may be not understanding the definition, but at the end of the day, it's an estimate only. It's not a highly scientific plot of every possible yes and no for coverage, but it's what's the reliable radius and circle that you can be in and know that you'll be able to access the repeater. So I'm working hard and very diligently right now to try to get these data elements updated so that as people who drive through know, hey, here's where you can reliably hit that repeater or not. Other information includes propagation reports, which you can add, audio feed information if the repeater is so configured, images, pictures of the repeater site, coverage maps, who the custodians are, how's it coordinated, who are the entities for trustee, email addresses for trustees, even various notes, things like that. So whole lot of data goes into describing just one repeater. And this, in the case of Georgia, 400 or 500 times. So that's a bit of a challenge, trying to keep all that balanced and updated and correct. So in really, I guess my point to you here is that the data in repeater book is very specialized, and it's very focused on storing repeater data. It's very wide, it's very deep, and in my sense of it, very well designed for what it's designed to do. From my impression so far, looks like it's very well managed. We've had excellent uptime. I've seen no crashes and problems to speak of. And it's got some good query tools and some good reporting tools in it that can pry loose all that information. Because, what good is it if you can't search it and parse it and cut it and slice it? So looking back on repeater book for Georgia, I mean, like I said, 402 repeaters on air across 12 regions, 159 counties, over 535 municipalities. We had over 18,700 licensed hams in Georgia. It's a lot. And scores of ham clubs out there too, and a lot of square miles. So that's the challenge of where does it all come from? Well, the repeater coordinating councils for sure are the first big source, and that's Sarah in this case. The ham clubs are second. They are probably, in some cases, more important. But they have their own sort of lists of, well, here are the repeaters that we sponsor, but they also have here are the counties around us, and here are the repeaters we use. And that's a good source of information too. Most clubs that have a call sign have a QRZ account as well. So they'll list information about their repeaters in a lot of cases, not always, but sometimes. And then the trustees have QRZ accounts as well. You're going to go to their sites and they'll say, yeah, I'm a trustee, and here are the repeaters that I support, or here's the ones that I maintain, or whatever. So that's a useful source. Of course, the FCC's ULS, the Universal Licensing System, is key, especially for club call signs, because every club has to have a trustee. If you're the owner, you're automatically the trustee. But if you are a club, you've got to have someone named as a trustee. So those are recorded in the FCC. And that's important. Also, ARRL has their own club listings, and even social media is pretty good. You get a lot of clubs use Facebook and Groups.io and other things. So you really start digging into this to try to get the online research. But where does it also come from? Well, from trustees, from custodians, managers, club members, regular users every day. And they do it two ways, either submitting an update request through Repeater Book, or they just send an email. I've been outreaching a lot. I've sent over 450 emails out to different trustees and custodians. And so we're getting emails back now from all that, and that's a good sign. So that's really sort of the direct reporting source. So there's the online research, and then there's the direct reporting that comes from all that. And of course, where else is it coming from? It's from, me driving around every day, looking at the different repeaters that are online and being exposed to the portfolio. And I travel a lot to North Georgia and to South Georgia in my work. So I keep my ears to the radio, and I try to make sure, well, hey, here's a list of some repeaters I'm not sure that exist or not, and I'll be sure to try to repeat, get to them and see if they work. So that's being in the coverage area is a good thing. So feet on the ground, boots on the ground, big important thing. Also, I've been very proud of this. Got about half dozen volunteers who I call VROs, volunteer repeater observers. Folks who've just lived in different parts of Georgia and said, hey, let me help you out here. If I live up in the Northwest Georgia, I'll let you know what's happening with repeaters up there. Big help, and it's a great thing to do. I have some information in the appendices to this presentation if you want to learn more about that, but it's a great help, and it's been a lot of fun doing it. So that's as far as repeater sourcing of data is concerned. So how do you maintain all that? Well, part of what I do in addition to Repeater Book is really, I have to pivot this data because my concern is who are the trustees. So what I have done is build an Outlook-based database. It's just Outlook, nothing fancy, but it really is designed to be focused on knowing who are the trustees in Georgia and what is their table of responsibilities relative to repeaters. Some trustees have one repeater they have to deal with. Got one in Valdosta who has 27. Go figure. So it's somewhere in between there is a struggle to find out what's the status of these repeaters, and the person who is the go-to is the trustee. So that's the job of this database, is to know who's responsible for these repeaters, and how do we make sure we know who's accountable for it. And it really becomes a repository for me when I do outreach. And like I said, we've got about 450 that have been sent out so far, and we've been getting some responses back, and that's a good thing. We'll talk more about response in a little bit, but that's sort of the tooling and the sources of information relative data that's coming into and being massaged in Repeater Book. Also, too, in the process of finishing up a ham club database, it's important, I think, to know the real full portfolio of what repeater sponsors, i.e. ham clubs, are out there, and to be able to know who they are, and of course know who the officers are, things like that. So that's in the works and will be done pretty soon. So as far as the data goes, what's key here is freshness. The data, the older it is, the less valuable it is. And so what Repeater Book does is it generates aging reports, and they can do it in 1, 3, 6, 12, 24-month increments. And their goal, stated goal, policy-wise, is to say nothing older than 24 months. Well, that seemed a little old to me. Personally, I wouldn't trust a list that was older than 6 months. And right now, all of the data, all the Repeater Book data in Georgia is 6 months or better. So that's should be some degree of comfort for you. Oh, I can't say that everything's perfect. I don't say that for a moment, but I'm very confident that we've at least touched most of it, if not all of it, and that we are in the process of refining that further. And so it's a continuous loop. It's a continuous process. And I'm looking at the aging reports and say, okay, what's over 6 months today, or what's over 3 months today? So I'm working between 3 and 6 right now. And like I said, uncovered a few 440 machines in Dublin I had no clue about. They said, yeah, we haven't been on Repeater Book in 5 years. So surprise. Little things like that happen, but like I said, overall, it's a continuous loop, and that's part of the thing that I do every day. What's the challenge as far as data is concerned? Well, trying to strike that balance. The database does a good job. It strikes the balance between the accuracy and precision that you need, coupled with the recency and the freshness. And, is it clear and concise, but is it relevant and useful? You can include a bunch of details, but if it's not relevant and useful, why do you have it in there? Is it complete and total, but is it uniform and consistent? So this balancing act, the database does a darn good job. But of course, if you don't get the right data in there, it doesn't matter how good the database structure is, it's getting that information that is fresh and relevant and appropriate for the database. And that's the challenge, and that's part of what am I doing day to day? Well, here's what I'm kind of doing day to day relative to Repeater Book. I'm maintaining the Georgia Repeater Book portfolio. I'm looking at the update requests that come in, either through email or through Repeater Book itself. And if they come through Repeater Book and they're Georgia, they have to be approved by me first. This is a human function that's needed because we don't want to open the database up to just random updates. Also, doing a kind of a continuous research, validation, communicating with the user base out there, looking at the stakeholders, supporting Repeater Book on a national basis, and also, bottom line, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, advocating what I call the value proposition for Repeater Book. And my point here is I think that it does have value. I think it is it's certainly been worthy of my best efforts. I think it will be worthy of your best attention as far as a tool to help you in the whole toolbox of tools that you're going to have to help you run your radio day to day.
I got a question here.
Sure.
Will Repeater Book ever provide a map search / listing?
It kind of does, but it's not really all that elegant. I'll go through a little bit of it in the demo, but it has some interfaces to Google Maps, and it does some very rough approximations on coverage circles, things like that. but I suspect that's going to be something that's coming in the future. The good news is Garrett Dow is a very talented database guy. He loves, I think he really gets into data, and I think this whole notion of how do you parse the data and how do you slice and dice it is part of the allure here. And I got to believe that that's going to be in the future because I'm seeing new things coming every day as an administrator as far as what's happening in the structure and in terms of the detail in the database. So that's a great question. I'll try to show that as we go through the demo. But yeah, mapping is going to become more and more part of the future, no doubt about it. And I'm glad to see someone else is thinking that way too. Any other questions or concerns, Dave? You want to put a pin in anything? Or are we doing okay as far as time?
Well, we're running a little long on time, or a little short on time. There was one other, it sounds more like a comment than a question. There's a report update. I'm guessing a feature everyone should be encouraged to use.
In what?
I'm assuming about the database data, unless AD4PZ wants to add some more comments to it.
Can you hear me?
DTR says it's in the app.
Yeah, well, there are you can use it's called an update request, and you can submit changes that if you see something that's happened in the repeater, you can certainly submit that officially through Repeater Book, and that will come to me in Georgia, and I'll validate that. What I do, of course, is immediately turn around and contact the trustee if I can, because we've had a few cases where people have submitted changes that really weren't valid. I don't know why they did that, but we've had to be careful. And a lot of trustees complain. They go, hey, my data is shifting out from under my feet. I didn't approve these changes. Why is it changing? Valid argument, valid criticism. So I take it upon me to say, I'm going to make sure that it is validated with the trustees first. And of course, if I don't have their email address, if I can't reach to them, then I just have to validate best I know based on the data that's out there. Did that come close to answering the question?
I would say so.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on then. Demo-wise, I just very quickly want to look at Repeater Book in general, how what are your export options, programming options, things like that. And if you have any special needs, I can certainly hang around afterwards if anybody wants to get into, hey, I'm having a particular issue, things like that. As far as searches go, if you look in a Repeater Book, one of the things that you'll see as we look at it is you can search a lot of different ways by geography, the country, the state, the region, the county. The proximity is a good search. And even now there's a neat function called travel search, which we have repeaters matched up with major arteries, major interstates and state roads. So that if you're traveling and you say, well, show me all the repeaters that are close to I-75, we attempt to do that for Georgia. And same with all the other states. So it's not perfect. It's still kind of janky. There's some work that needs to be done, but it's functionality. It's there. As far as search goes beyond that, you can search all the way down to specific call signs. Show me for all 4 W4GR repeaters in Georgia or wherever. Find me all specific frequencies, or show me all the off-air or in-test repeaters. What affiliations are there? Is it an Aries repeater or whatever? And even down to keywords. If you want to find all listings in the Georgia, wherever that have the word cedar in it, then you could certainly do that search. So as far as determining factors for the programming tools, once again, it's going to be a factor based on your own radio. You have a lot of choices relative to what programming tool you're going to use, and some other factors have to do with the kind of radio you've got, and also the amount of memory you've got in your radio, and how well it organizes and aggregates that data. But end of the line, it's your personal use case as to what you're going to want to use to program with, and how you're going to want to engage Repeater Book to get that data. So just really quick, I would be curious, is anybody out there having any specific concerns or issues for a specific make or model of a radio, or some programming tool having trouble with? I'd just be curious to know what problems or issues are coming up relative to programming your radio, and also, where you're getting your data. Are you using Repeater Book? Are you having a good experience or not? And once again, I'm certainly not fishing for compliments here. If you've got an issue that has come up with Repeater Book, I certainly want to hear about it. But I'd be curious to know about these two questions: is, you know, what concerns have you got, if any, and what configuration are you using as far as programming tools, and where are you getting your data and how are you doing it? So like I said, Dave, have you got any feedback on that, or is that something we just want to proceed and let people?
Not yet, but if folks want to go get off mute at this point, feel free to do so and jump in.
Well, you could do it with chat as well. I don't want to slow it down. I just thought I'd certainly want to be available after the presentation. If someone's stuck or, you know, hit a brick wall or having an issue, certainly want to reach out and try to help however we can. That's for sure.
Oh, no, here's one. Somebody wants some a level of detail added to the, I'm assuming they mean DMR instead of DRM. So the suggestion is, it would be nice if the repeater book would list the DRM talk groups, DMR talk groups that are supported by the repeater.
There is a way to do that. It's enumerated on the individual basis. But yeah, there are searches that can be done for DMR, but certainly there's always room for improvement. But yeah, try to find an example and when we get onto the repeater book. One of the things that repeater book has just recently instituted has been allowing trustees to manage their talk groups directly. It used to be that to change something in a talk group, you had to go through the administrator to do it. Now, if you're registered with Repeater Book and you are good to go with them, you can change those on the fly yourself. So that's an added advantage that has just popped up. That's a great question, and
that certainly lessens the workload on the individual admins. Plus
sure, absolutely. Well, it's just, you need flexibility, and that's part of where the future is going to be, is giving. That's why it's so important, and that's my argument, is you really need to register the repeater book. Not that it costs you anything, and it's not that it's, you know, it's the value of having people affiliated who we can know are trustworthy and can touch the data and not worry that they're going to do something that's going to make it go boom. So once again, though, programming is important, but also stressing to make sure you understand how to manually make these changes as well. The programming tools are great, but you also should know how to do this manually. I've been caught a few times where I had needed to change something in a program and didn't have my programming tool with me, and I sweated bullets trying to make this icon 51A change the uplink tone, but I finally figured it out. But as far as tips are concerned, keeping a PDF on your phone of your user manual. What a great idea, you know. Repeater Book has a very good mobile app. Highly recommend it. It's very stable, very useful, and it's GPS enabled. So you can be anywhere. It knows where you are because your phone is GPS enabled. So it'll tell you all the repeaters that are close by you. So highly recommend it. Also, too, one little tip about that is that there is an update gap between the time the browser version of Repeater Book is updated and the time that the mobile version is updated. Apparently, it's how data is handed off when you install the application. Repeater Book downloads the entire database to your phone as well. So it's how often that data gets refreshed on the phone can have an effect on how recent you have it. But it's still very useful as far as a travel tool is concerned. Other things, keeping a printed copy of your manual is also great in your go box or glove compartment. Saved me more than a few times. Making sure that you put simplex frequencies in your call list too. Yeah, the Repeater Book will give you all the repeater frequencies, but make sure you put 5.2 direct and 440 direct and all the rest of the directs, because you want to have those in your scan as well. Also, end of the line in terms of programming is concerned, I've struggled with how much do I program, but if you've got plenty of memory, my suggestion is program as much as you can, for example, multi-region or in Georgia, and then use what's in your radio to help you step through and parse and organize that data, so you don't have to scan 400 plus repeaters every time you want to scan. Of course, every repeater slate. Someone's mic is on or no one. Who's that? Dave, is that you?
No, it's not. Actually, I don't recognize the call sign. Okay, I think we're probably okay at the moment.
Okay.
There was a question that came up when you were talking about the repeater book application on iOS and Android.
Yeah.
The person asked, what is repeater book's relation with the providers of the repeater book iOS and Android app? And he mentions he uses them often.
I do believe the fellow is a Brit. I believe there's a formal partnership there. He had written an app called Repeater, and it was popular in Europe. And so he contacted Repeater Book and said, "Hey, let me build a Repeater Book database that will be an equivalent for Repeater here in Europe." And they did. And so that's been a very successful partnership. And, he's a very talented developer. I've been on several calls with him and messaging back and forth. And that's undergoing constant revision and improvement. I've got a test version running on my phone now. It's going to have a lot of really cool features and functions. So, but as it stands now, just the fact that you can pick up your phone and know with the high degree of certainty what is close to you from a GPS perspective is immensely valuable. So did that answer the question, Dave?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right. Moving on, also real quick tip, when you program your radio, don't just put the frequency in. I'm getting people hand me their phone saying, help me program it, and they've got the frequencies in there in the memory slides. Like, the radio already gives you the frequency. Put something in it that means something, like W4GR Norcross, something like that. So don't have a lot of space. Apparently it's only 16 characters max. It does a certain amount of truncation and that doesn't really allow you to, it does a certain amount of scrolling, but I would say just abbreviate like I'll get out, do it aggressively, and use apostrophes because they're skinny and they work wonders. Any other programming tips any of you might want to throw out there? These were mine, but your mileage may vary. Stipulations as far as export, I'll go through this very quickly. Generally, what the concern is, we want to make sure that if you're exporting data, that you protect it, that you treat it well, that you don't use it for personal financial gain, that kind of stuff. That's happened in the past, unfortunately. So we want to keep that from happening, and you want to make sure that you don't redistribute that information. If you're using it for your own benefit or helping others, that's completely fine. And in the spirit of camaraderie and all good things ham radio, that's what the data should be used for. And we want to share that data as much as we can, as refined and as beautiful as that data is. We want to share it, make it something that everybody can use. It's sort of like, to me, that data, when I finally was able to program my radio, was like the batteries in the toy I got at Christmas, because once I had my programming done, I could use that radio wonderfully. So I'd like to think of it as the batteries that go into your best Christmas toy. And that's not a bad place to be. As far as what's supported, well, Peterbook exports to a lot of different platforms, but RT for sure, Chirp, G4 HFQ for Jesus, even CSV, comma separated values if need be, which takes you to spreadsheets and a few other proprietary programming tools out there, ICOM, Kenwood, Anytone, and the like. But just know that there are certainly a lot of ways in which Repeaterbook tries to support, but certainly the two most popular, RT and Chirp and G4 HFQ. Major steps. Primarily, it's using the search to make sure you find where you really want to be. What counties are you really looking for? What specific areas you want? What frequency bands does your radio support? You know, I've had friends who say, hey, I'm programming my radio, I'm getting errors. Well, it's because you're putting a 6-meter repeater in a 2-meter repeater or 2-meter radio. So a lot of times the searches have to be targeted to the right frequencies and the right modes. If you've got an FM radio and you're putting in D-star repeaters, that's not a good drill. Exporting that data, importing it to Repeaterbook, from Repeaterbook into a programming tool, and ultimately getting that uploaded to your radio and then validating that through using it on the air. So That's major steps along the way. And of course, just looking at it from a broad perspective, I see this once again as just like the repeater directory. You're going to want to revisit this. It's not a program at once and it's done sort of proposition. I would suggest every 3 to 6 months, you're going to want to go back and review, relist, and figure out if there are any changes occur, at least every 6 months. Year may be getting a little old. So I'm surprised. I wouldn't think there'd been much change, but I've seen a lot of change even here in Georgia. There may not be anything happening right next door, but would be if you're traveling a lot. It's good to know what's changed. And so that will help give you a little more relevant, a little more recent, and a little more complete view of the data in Georgia. So let's look at Repeater Book real quick. I've got hopefully that pulled up, and I won't belabor it too much, but let's see if everybody see the screen okay?
I can see it okay.
Okay, good, good. Well, just very quickly, this is the screen you get when you bring Repeater Book up. It's fairly standard. Just real quick, you've got on the left-hand side here a menu which has home and different information. The thing you're going to go to the most is this, what I'm pointing to right here, the North American repeaters. That's where you're going to do most of your searching or most of your information. There's other things as far as the rest of the world, some simplex, which is still just growing, US GMRS repeaters, as you see here. A lot of wiki and articles posted as well, forums, even have a place for reporting stolen gear, and also some other associated facts and figures and reaching out to other people. But this is the screen you get. Also, too, on the right-hand side, if you're looking for a particular repeater, in this case, Fort GR, you can just put in the call sign and say, show me all Fort GR repeaters. There they are. So that's a nice, quick way to do a search. Just go to the front page, type in the call sign of what you're looking for, hit a search. But you can also do that search, like I said, for QRZ and some others, MQTH, MCall.
You just inadvertently answered one person's question from about 20 or so.
Oh, okay, okay, good.
If the six,
That's fortuitous. Very good, very good.
they were asking if the 6 meter repeater was open. I said, well, you can look it up on Repeater Book.
It is. Apparently, there's one that's up there. It's so some that are off air and some that are, I don't think any testing or not. That's the also you can get to North American repeaters down here. If you look at where the pointers, you can either down here or right there. But that's the main thing. So you do a search. In this case, you say here are all the repeaters that are W4GR. Then it comes down to, well, then what can you do with that data? The whole idea is you're going to export that. You go here to the blue bar along the top, and you have export options depending on what you found and what's in your search. In this case, it will support export to Chirp, G4HFQ, and to RT. If you want to, just real quick, I'll show you how to do that. You just simply click on export, and if you look in the very bottom, I don't know if you can see that on this particular thing or not, but you do get the file that's downloaded. It just downloads that file, and it's immediately there for your use.
Yeah, it's showing a CSV file that was downloaded.
Yeah, so that's a big help, and that is part of the beauty of how quickly that data just gets put out there. You can do the same thing with a comma separated value file or G4HFQ and others. So if there's a problem, there's a place that allows you to report. If there's a problem with information as far as maps concerned, I don't know if the mapping function works on this one or not. Let's click and find out. See if the demo rule is true. Yep, sure enough, it had a problem. So it's typical on a demo.
Not today.
Not today. But I promise it normally works. But I did discover this today going through it. But it does provide for other searches. Apparently, it does. So anyway, but in addition to just that search, you can search by state, search by county or counties. I'll show you that one real quick. That's a very powerful tool. And like I mentioned, if you pick a particular state, in this case, good old Georgia, then Repeater Book will then ask you what counties, plural, would you like? So if you, for example, want to do Gwinnett, you can click on that. But let's say we also want to do Hall. You just hold the control button down and hit Hall. Let's say we wanted to add Hart County as well. Boom. So now you can do a search on all 3 counties at once, as opposed to just one. And then you can pick, do I want all bands? Do I want just a specific band? Or do I want all locations, or do I want certain counties? Do I want all call signs or some specific call signs, other features? Also, too, you're probably going to want to limit your search to on-air repeaters. You don't want to get a list that includes all the off-air repeaters. So click on that and find all the all coverage, and then hit submit, and it should come back with an answer. And sure enough, 22 on-air repeaters in all 3 counties that we search. So to me, that's probably one of the more valuable search functions, is being able to build your own region, in effect. You may travel to 4 or 5 different counties. Well, you can build that list, do that search, and do 90% of the heavy lifting through the search before you have to go through and slug it out and editing this list in Chirp or in RT Systems or whatever tool you use. So that's part of the like I said, let's see if this mapping, that's already done. Let's see if that mapping works any better here. See if it dies. Come on, the Google Maps. Ah, it did work. Didn't make me a total liar here. Come on, Google Maps. No, almost. Well, anyway.
One person asked, what is the advantage of logging in? See, we can see you're logged in there on the upper left-hand corner.
Yes. If you're logged in, you can export data. If you're not logged in, you can't. You have to be a registered user of with RepeaterBook in order to export. You can search and get all kinds of advantages and not have to be logged in at all. And that's the beauty of it as well. It doesn't put a lot of requirements in it. But if you're going to export data, they're going to say, well, we need to know who you are. We don't even require, in a lot of cases, we let people who are not members also submit update requests. We don't want to limit the chance that there'll be people who have information about a change in a repeater who just don't happen to be RepeaterBook members. So we try to keep that open and try to make it as accessible as possible. So there isn't, but that's the key, is you got to be a member, or you got to be registered. And that's not a huge deal, but it's out there. Is anything else anybody wants to see relative to functionality on Facebook? We could spend all night. I don't want to do that. It's already 8:10. So I just want to see if there's anything else anybody has an interest in before we plow on to the next phase of this presentation.
I haven't seen anything in the chat yet, specifically to look at, unless I'm missing something.
Well, if something pops up, we can switch back. It's certainly, it's very easy to do. Let me go back and get back to the, where is the, I guess that's, here it is. I'll do this real quick.
So what is actually, I have a question though. So what's the message form about? I mean, I'm wondering what kind of topics around RepeaterBook people might have.
Are you talking about me, or are you asking them?
No, I'm asking you, Chuck. On the left-hand menu, underneath the repeater list, there's articles, forum, wiki. So the forum, is that like a BB forum on there?
Let me look. No, I'm trying to share it. I'm having problems here. Okay, here it is. Oh yeah, you're seeing it there. Okay. On what now? Forum?
Yeah,
well, just click on it. It's just a general kind of a topic discussions kind of thing. I haven't really spent much time on it, but there are a few questions. Some of this is some are administrators talking to one another, going, "Hey, I'm having a hard time doing cloning certain pages," things like that. But it's certainly valued. It's there for you, and you're certainly what. But I don't know if you have to be registered. You probably do to get into the forums. I would hope you would be. So, but that's certainly one of the things. And but let's get back to the present. And did that answer your question, Dave? I don't think I did a very good job.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, let me do a quick this and share. Boom. Okay, good. Let's try and get back to the slideshow here. Okay, here's the slideshow. There we go. Now we're good. Now we're moving. Now I just need to find out where we were. And where we were, bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, remember you did.
Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. So to wrap it up, and I know we're running late, but I certainly want to do justice to your time, and I can't thank you enough for being here and listening to all this. What I'm most proud of, I think, is that we've been able to get a lot done in 6 months. We've gotten over 1,200 updates, 450 emails sent out. We've gotten the unknowns moved to 0. We've built a database of trustees that's going to be helpful for outreach. We've reinforced a lot of controls relative to protecting the data that's out there. We've reduced a lot of errors, omissions, and duplicates, and there were quite a few duplicates. Resolved a lot of the chronic issues. Apparently, North Georgia had a number of disputes as to where the repeater was really located. Is that a Tennessee repeater or is it a Georgia repeater? We've also initiated a good team of half dozen folks who are interested in helping out. So lessons learned, plenty of good news, a lot of good repeaters out there, a lot of very cooperative trustees and custodians, folks who really want to help and do the right thing, and very active in maintaining that information. Good as far too as the ham clubs. We've got over 100 in Georgia apparently. And overall, it looks like the repeater book business model, and it funds itself through advertising. That's how it keeps the lights on, is working. And it works and represents the repeaters in Georgia pretty well. And once again, I hope I don't have a lot of bias in that I'd be the first one to raise my hand and say, this stinks. But what I'm seeing is a company that seems to be very focused on the idea of sharing information in the ham spirit, and doing it free, and doing it through a network of hams who are administrators throughout the world. And so that model has worked, and so that is exciting. As far as concerns, my biggest surprise in all of this, and I'm just sharing what I've seen, I'm really surprised on how many trustees I have not been able to reach through emails or anything else. I've probably got 75% covered on emails. Doesn't mean they respond, but at least I know what the email address is, ostensibly, for 75% of the trustee database. Of the 450 I've sent out, I've gotten about 10% response, which for a mailer isn't that bad, but it's still a lot lower than I'd like it to be. And if you do the math, it means I've only heard back from 7.5% of the entire trustee database out there. I'm surprised at the number of repeaters that aren't covered by Sarah or aren't coordinated by Sarah. I figured they all would be, but apparently they're not. Also, the membership in Sarah. I would think if I'm a trustee, I'm going to be a Sarah member. I'm in Georgia or in the Southeast. Apparently not, about 50%. And of course, equally distressing is the notion of how many trustees are not repeater book members. Now, that's their choice. It doesn't cost anything. Sarah's $30 a year, but it's the best $30 you're going to spend. Ever want to learn a lot? Go spend $30 and go dig through the Sarah database. It's great. And also too, just sporadic feedback. I've had some whoppers of errors in the repeater book, and no one said a word. And they sat out there for 5 years, and no one said a word. That tells me someone isn't looking or just don't care. I don't think that's it, but that would tell me that there's some concern about that. Also, like I said, I suspect that a lot of these emails that I'm sending out are actually getting into junk folders and spam folders. I'll get a few emails after having sent an email out 3 months ago. I'll get someone saying, hey, Chuck, I just got your email. I was cleaning out my spam filter and sorry it took me so long. So anecdotally, I'm seeing that that's happening a lot. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to go to snail mail. That may not be any better, but I'm going to at least try, because there are folks who just don't want to respond to an email that comes unsolicited. You know, who is this? What is this repeater book? And who is this Chuck Adams guy? And why is he asking me about my repeaters? So I'm going to try to do it with something in snail mail. Of course, that may hit the circular folder as well, but we'll see. That'll be the next one.
I guess the obvious question about doing a snail mail campaign with so many different repeater trustees is, how do you fund that? That's a lot of money for postage.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be me.
Wow.
Yeah,
Are you taking
I'm
donations?
just that darn dedicated to the task. It's a little bit of an obsession, but I gotta find a way to make it keep the cost as low as I can. I'm not gonna mail everybody because the ones I've already reached, I'm not going to. The ones I'm gonna focus on are the ones that I can't reach, the ones that don't have an email address. I'll pound them to death with emails, and hopefully we'll get a response. But it's been a lot of funny responses. I had some where they put little firewalls up between you. When you send in an email, they say, "Who are you and what do you want?" kind of stuff. But I just nice them to death, and most of them turn around to be nice about it. So, but yeah, it's gonna cost a few bucks. But I'll maybe have to go to Garrett and say, "Hey, hey, why don't you give me a few pennies here to pay for stamps or something like that." But I'm just curious enough to want to know. Okay, we can't get you by email. We ought to be able to get you by snail mail. So other strange things that have occurred along the way, topics for another day, just the time, the effort that it takes, a whole bunch of different sources of data. None of them match up. You're holding up stuff to the light. You're banging the lists together and you're saying, okay, what falls out, what matches up, and how do you resolve the conflicts? Issue of paper repeaters. I hadn't heard the term, but learned of all that. Apparently, that's a bit of a problem. There's some cases where repeaters are ostensibly existing, but they really aren't out there. But someone's holding on to a repeater frequency pair because they want to build something someday. At least that's the belief. Also, missing or overstated coverage data. We've got several repeaters in Georgia where they say, yeah, my coverage radius is 75 miles. And I go, okay, great. But that same repeater, I get about 2 or 3 updates a week that say this repeater's off air because they live 30 miles from the repeater and they can't hit it. So they just say, well, the repeater is off air. Well, it's really not, but its coverage radius isn't 75 miles. So I think it's a macho thing, or it's just, I don't know. But I've had several that we've had to kind of modulate some of the numbers as far as coverage radius is concerned, because you don't want to overstate, you don't want to mislead, you don't want to say, oh yeah, this repeater is good from sea to shining sea, when in fact it really isn't. So that's been a bit of a challenge. Also just missing and silent key trustees. I've had probably 6 or more trustees that we found out were silent keys and that nobody had ever even been able to update repeater book. So whenever I find those, I make sure I report them to the National Silent Key, and I'll look for their obituaries and post those as well, and I'll put them into archive. That was a interesting, unexpected development. But also just missing trustees, not being able to reach out and get them, a little surprising. And of course, the deadly silence of the repeaters. Where is everybody? I go to a lot of different repeaters and travel the state, and I'll say KV4VT, Kilo Victor 4 Victor Tango, for mic check. Yep, crickets. Also, number of repeaters out there malfunctioning, cycling. I've had a couple of cases where I wanted to reach out and tell the trustee, hey, your repeater's cycling, been doing it for 3 hours, doesn't have an email address published. You don't have to publish your personal email address. Put a front or a throwaway address or something, but to not have some way for folks who are using your repeater to reach you, I just think is an abdication. And I would hope that we're gonna do a better job of that in the future. But abused repeaters, malfunctioning repeaters, something that trustees and custodians need to be doing a little better job at. Most, of course, all the GARS repeaters are outstandingly great repeaters. They're wonderfully maintained, and the people who do it, they're just wonderful. So, but I'm talking a few here and there. These are one-off kind of things. So what's the bottom line? My point to you all is that I think that Repeater Book does offer a whole constellation of some real strong benefits. And I've got a table here, and I'm not going to read through all of it, but basically the inflection point is why would you register? Well, because you get connectivity. You're going to be able to export data out of Repeater Book if you are a registered user. bunch of other stuff. If you are a trustee, you're going to get certain updates as far as anytime the repeater listing changes, you're going to be notified. You can also lock that data. As I mentioned earlier, you can move repeaters on air, off air as a trustee, and also get updates and reminders about when you need to be checking and rechecking the data. Also, as I mentioned before, the DMR, you can control DMR talk groups if you're a trustee. And growth, you can add other custodians and remove them as need be, especially if you're a club. That's important because you're going to want to control who the recent custodians are, get the reminders that you need, and ultimately access to the future, which is a lot of new features and functions, and trustees and custodians who are registered are going to have that first. And that's a great thing to have. So speaking of the future, what's happening in the future? Well, there's a lot of different words that get thrown about the future, right? You know, back to the future. Well, what's past is prologue and the world awaits. Well, here's my view of the future. I just want my flying car. Where in the heck is my flying car? I was promised a flying car. I don't have it. Next best thing, though, is a repeater that's going to be really cool and do a lot of cool things. That's why we're in ham radio, right? Because we use these hands and we make our own flying cars. Looking at repeaters, though, from a slot perspective, from a strength, weakness, opportunity threat, what do repeaters stand today? Well, you know, it's probably the leading regional RF communications method the hams use. There are others, but repeaters are way up there. Most of them are well built, good infrastructure, well maintained. The value's been embraced, mature, and the technology's been pretty standardized throughout the world. So a lot of ways, repeaters have a lot to say for themselves. But on the weaknesses side, there's a growth of a lot of different modes that are very incompatible. We've got a lot of neat digital modes, but they don't talk to one another necessarily. Now, there's talk of trying to bring all that together, and I hope they do. But right now, there's more fracturing. There's limited features and functionality on these repeaters, inconsistent coverage. And of course, like I said, the very deadly, I think this is deadly for repeaters, is the whole silence. Maybe it's microphone reluctance. I just think there are too many other alternatives, including these guys. So given the strengths and weaknesses, what are the opportunities for the future? Certainly, networking is improving and growing. More and more repeaters are being networked together. The VoIP, voice over IP, and things like that. Integration, though, of other data services, I think, is in the offing. Good news is, us hams are good at being agile to respond to new technologies. But where I suspect things are headed, and I'd like to see this, and this is where my flying car comes back, I want to see artificially intelligent repeaters. I think that's where the future is. And we can talk about that in a minute. So what's the existential threat? How do we get past the deadly silence of the repeaters? Well, don't know. But the threats for sure are decline in use of repeaters. Costs are going straight up. It's not the cost of the equipment anymore. It's the darn rent to be on a tower on top of the mountain. And of course, regulatory, all the repeaters are burning in California, and apparently they won't be able to put them back because of the fees that are involved when they get done burning. There'll be, unfortunately, further mode fracturing as we have more and more proliferation of different standards as far as digital modes is concerned. End of the day, we keep acting like this, we're going to lose band space. We're going to lose spectrum. FCC is going to turn around and say, we'll auction this off to the highest bidder. I don't think that'll happen right away, but if we don't mind our P's and Q's, we might use it or lose it. So what do we do?
Hey, Chuck, we're down to about 2 minutes here.
Okay, thank you. So wrap it up. What do? Either we use it or lose it. And we're going to either innovate and flourish, or we're going to stagnate and we're going to perish. And I think the answer to this is going to be two things: integrate with other data services and adapt artificial intelligence. You got to talk to somebody, right? If you're not going to talk to other hams, talk to a robot. The future can be informed by our past. How many of you, and I'll look for the glimmer of recognition out there, remember Aggregate Supply Company? Anybody? Well,
oh yes.
Okay. Well, those of you remember, they were a big player for hams. Back in the 70s, they were the player as far as parts and radios and everything ham radio. They did something that endeared them to me in my heart for all time. They put a perfectly good operating, very highly calibrated test set in a side window of their store. Anybody remember that? Well, they did. And they ran it over the weekends and after hours. And hams would drive for miles around. I did it. I made several pilgrimages to ACK. I bought a Regency HR2B. Remember those, John? Regency HR2B? Let's strike a familiar note. Those needed to be adjusted as far as FM deviation was concerned. I went to ACK and did it right there in a parking lot on a Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon. So I never forgot that. And I think just like the past can inform the future, amateur radios in the future are going to need a little innovative kick in the ACK. And I did say ACK. We already talk to our phones every day. And we're going to need an AI interface, just like these things do if we're going to compete. And that means we're going to have a ham personality. Maybe it's an Elmer or an Ellie or an ACK. Hal's already spoken for, but we would have an interface that would be microphone only, no buttons and keyboards, conversational interface that give us a chance to have feedback like, hey, Elmer, what's my VFO accuracy like today? Repeater should be able to do that right now. Not hard.
1 minute.
Or Ellie, what's my voice intelligibility like through your AI interpreter? Or hey, ACK, what's my FM deviation level like? That should be easy to do. We should have that. That should be our flying car. Or coming down from the repeater, hey, Elmer, what's the overall health of the repeater today? Or Ellie, what's the status of our links? Or hey, ACK, what's my emergency briefing for today? So where's the future? It's one place, gentlemen. It's in our hands. And we just got to have the courage to stand out, embrace it, and make it happen. So with that.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Chuck, that was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. You went into so much detail on repeaterbook.com and showing, a lot of people were commenting in the chat about how they enjoyed seeing features that they weren't aware of. Thanks so much.
Sure. Well, I could certainly, if need be, I'd be more than happy to stick around afterwards if someone's got any problems, issues. I mean, we're here to make all things good. And there are a lot of talented people out there who may know the answer better than me. So, but that's it. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but end of the day, I certainly Repeater Book has been certainly enjoyable to work with. I commend them to you highly. I hope that you will find some value in using it. And I hope that if you find an error, you find a mistake, let me know. I can make the change quickly. Can't fix the world, but I can certainly do something about Georgia. And I would believe that the data in Georgia is certainly worth trusting and believable. And if I find an error, by golly, I'm going to jump on it fast. So. Oh,
I've personally used Repeater Book to program the memories in my software-defined radio, a program called SDR Uno.
Excellent.
And also another SDR program called Cubic SDR, as well as programming my HPs. It's been immensely valuable for providing the initial inputs to those, and I've tweaked a little bit over the years to match what I've seen. So it's really good to see that you've grabbed the bull by the horns here in the last 6 months and have really done a bang-up job with cleaning up the data in for Georgia in the database and getting unknowns down to zero.
Appreciate that.
There is a question here. Mitch wanted to know who your counterpart is in South Carolina.
Counterpart, I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. I think there are a couple in South Carolina. Okay,
and you mentioned you had like 6 assistants here in Georgia. Are you the only admin over Georgia, or are there other people sharing the role with you?
No, I'm the administrator. These are folks who just are very casually out there sort of they look at the database and they'll as they drive around, they'll say, oh yeah, I live up here. I'm familiar with a lot of these repeaters. And if something changes or doesn't look right, they'll send me an email and say, nah, this repeater isn't online anymore. It's a voluntary sort of thing. But end of the day, I'm the one that is massaging that data and getting it into Repeater Book. But it's a very voluntary thing, and I give it a fancy. We don't have any fancy handshakes or secret codes or anything like that. We don't wear any fancy clothes. We just try to work together. And I hear from them occasionally. I hear from once in a while. I hear some. I hear regular basis. But it's if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you just want to nothing else, just be an official observer or voluntary official observer of the repeaters, that's certainly helpful and been a big help. And lots of people are very cooperative, and I'd welcome anybody. And like I said, I will give this PowerPoint stack to Dave or Dallas, and I'll let you guys post it on the GARS website, and you're certainly welcome to peruse it and certainly, use it for whatever you wish to use it for. So what other questions do you have for me?
Folks, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions that you have about Repeater Book, or if you have any other general hand.
Like I said, it's a tough because there's so many different tools out there, so many different radios, and sometimes the brick walls that people hit are a function of that weird stack of technology. But end of the day, it shouldn't be that hard, and Repeater Book tries to make it a little easier, but it's still you kind of have to read between the lines and programming some of these things.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead. I don't hear anybody asking questions, so I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now.
All right.